Hey friends, it's Tomer, and in this video we're going to be analyzing and ranking the brand new Fallout Commander pre-constructed decks. We'll start with a short explanation of each of the deck's goals, analyze their strengths and weaknesses, provide 10 quick upgrades to the deck, and then finally rank all the decks in a tier list. We begin with Science, which is an artifact energy deck, and in fact it's the first ever energy deck we've ever seen in Commander. There are plenty of artifact and artifact support cards, energy and energy support cards, and then finally a bunch of cards to tie both archetypes together into a cohesive deck. The goal is to play artifacts, generate energy, and then pump the team and smash face. In terms of supporting the deck themes, we've got 17 cards that generate or spend energy, kind of on the low side to be honest, and there are 59 artifacts and cards that care about artifacts, like Synth Infiltrator. Very high, but kind of expected since the artifact archetype is one of the largest in the entire format. Then there are 13 cards that overlap between the two archetypes, usually just energy cards that happen to be artifact, but there is a big exception, our Commander. Dr. Madison Lee is doing a lot of heavy lifting, making this deck feel like an energy deck. She's the best energy generator in the list, coming down on turn 3, and then adding energy to all of her subsequent artifact spells. She also comes with 3 strong energy payoffs, with the flexibility here making her useful every turn. Without her in the command zone, the deck would essentially be a generic artifact list with a small energy sub-theme, but since she's just 3 mana, she kind of covers up the glaring lack of actual energy cards. Now let's look at deck ratios. As I often explain in my budget commander articles, every time I build a rough draft of a deck, I make sure I have a certain ratio of mana, interaction, card advantages, etc. This gives me a reference point to compare to the deck and see which areas may need improvement. My general ratio is 50 mana, lands and ramp, usually a 37-13 split, 10 card draw, cards that net you 2 or more cards in hand, 8 targeted removal, split between creature, artifact, enchantment removal, and counter magic, 3 board wipes, creature light decks might want 1 more, creature heavy decks might want 1 less, 2 graveyard recursion, 2 flexible tutors. At higher budgets, I recommend more tutors, 1 graveyard hate since you need to keep graveyard decks honest, and at least 1 finisher, something that can win games the turn you cast it without too much setup. That's always my starting point, which is then tweaked to suit individual deck strategy and further tweaked with playtesting. I always find this checklist very useful to figure out some quick ways to improve the deck in question. And these ratios certainly aren't gospel. A lot of decks are going to veer wildly off from them, but like let's say we look at a Precon with 0 targeted removal, that might be something that we want to be addressing very easily in the upgrade section. Alright, for the science ratios, we've got 50 mana, 37 lanes, and 13 ramp. Most of the ramp is generic artifacts like Talisman of Creativity, but that works with our commander because that also generates energy for us. We also have 14 draw. Most are based on artifacts like One with the Machine or energy like Synth Eradicator. And there are 8 targeted removal, a nice mix of permanent removal, some energy based like the Mother Load, and others are artifact based like Dispatch. There's only 1 board wipe actually, it's just Austere Command, and there are 5 graveyard recursion, some of which kind of suck, and some of them are okay. There's also 0 tutors, 1 graveyard hate kind of, it's Rex, but it kind of sucks at it. And there are at least 4 finishers, which is actually the highlight of the deck, honestly. We've got Liberty Prime if we just want to smash face. We have a lot of go wide finishers like the Pride Win. But my favorite for the entire deck is Sentinel Sarah Lions, which enters the battlefield for 5 mana, swings for 6, pumps up the team, and also just domes your opponent for lethal in an artifact deck. So overall, the ratios are pretty darn good. There's a lack of board wipes in the deck, but the rest are good ratios, and the finishers are exceptional. Alright, now let's check out 10 quick upgrades for the deck. I'm trying to kind of explore the energy side of the deck because that's the most interesting part of it, honestly. Like, we've seen other artifact decks before, and those are well and good, but I wanted to expand on the energy thing because that's kind of the most unique part of the deck. So I'm adding all the remaining good energy cards, which there aren't really that many left over, but there's a couple good ones from Kaladesh. Gonti's Aether Heart is fantastic. It generates a ton of energy in this deck, probably the best energy generator in an artifact deck, and then you could just cash it in to take an extra turn, which is wild. Aetherworks Marvel is also one of the best cards in the entire deck. It generates energy at an okay rate. It's better if you have like fetch lands or more things that want to be sacrificed. Like if you add like more junk tokens or treasure tokens and stuff like that, then it can generate more energy. But even ignoring the energy generator part, just tapping it and spending that energy is very mana efficient in terms of card selection, and then casting that spell for free is just very good. Lightning Runner is also another great way of not only just generating energy, but also doubling as a finisher in the deck. Even if it dies on the first swing, you still get an extra combat, and if you have any ways of granting this evasion, then it gets even more ridiculous. Electrostatic Pummeler is also another card that's just very good in the deck. It enters the battlefield with some energy, but it's also an artifact, so it doubles up on synergies over here. And then if you have any sort of way of giving it evasion or pumping it up, which the deck has various ways of doing both, it could just start one-shotting people. It's great. Then we've got Era of Innovation, another great energy generator in an artifact deck. Obviously, it's kind of mana efficient because you have to pay mana to generate the energy, but you can always cash it in to draw 3 cards, and that's a great rate for a 2 mana thing. Consulate Surveillance is something that I don't see anybody talking about in terms of energy decks, but I swear, I played a jank energy deck on Commander Clash, and this was literally the MVP. Like, I was the arch enemy, and I'm not saying the fog meta is real, but this just kept me alive throughout the entire game, and had it not been for this ability to just constantly fog my opponents as they're attacking me, I would have been dead many, many turns ago. Then there's one more good energy card that hasn't actually been printed yet. It was spoiled to show up in Modern Horizons 3. There's going to be a couple new cards coming on in the main set that is trying to support energy and make it kind of a thing in Modern. And also, by the way, there's going to be an entire Precon, Commander Precon coming in Modern Horizons 3 that's also Jeskai. So if you're really looking forward to energy as a Jeskai archetype, then Modern Horizons 3, that Precon plus this one is going to make it into a full-fledged archetype for sure. So those were all the good energy cards. I didn't really see anything else that was noteworthy, but it's also an artifact deck, and there are plenty of great artifacts that we can be adding to the deck. So Thousand Moon Smithy, it just pumps out huge artifact finishers for the deck, and then it flips into a land that pumps out even more artifact finishers, big constructs, essentially gnome structs. So that card is just a staple. Then we also have Dowsing the Vice. It's another flip land that is fantastic in any artifact deck that can run it. It just is a nice haste enabler for the deck, which the deck is kind of lacking outside of our commander. And then it flips into a land that doubles as a haste enabler and finisher. And then the deck was kind of lacking in board wipes. So I just threw in Cyclonic Rift. If you don't like Cyclonic Rift, you can just throw in basically anything else like Blasphemous Act or whatever, and it will do the trick. Then for 10 cuts, I was cutting basically anything that doesn't fit the theme of either artifacts or energy, or it fits the theme, but it just does it very poorly. So Loyal Apprentice, it makes an artifact, but it just kind of sucks. Red Death has nothing to do with artifacts or energy. Archaic Ganon is probably the worst card in the entire deck. It's just a horrible overcosted looter. Unexpected Windfall is like fine. It makes artifacts and stuff, but it does so kind of very slowly, and you don't really take advantage of anything it's doing. Camp is just overcosted. The bobbleheads, they're both overcosted, and they're just not good enough when you only have 2 of them in the deck. Overencumbered is just not very good. It doesn't really do much to stop your opponents. And then the final 2 cards that I'm cutting are Mechanized Production and Nerd Rage. The production is actually good. It's on theme and stuff, at least in theory. In practice, though, you're not going to have like a lot of the same copy of the same artifact. This is not like a treasure deck, a clue deck or something where you can just flood the board with the same type of artifact and easily win on your next upkeep. And this kind of just puts a big target on your head without accomplishing too much, in my opinion. I've been playing this card a lot, and it just has been underwhelming each time. And then Nerd Rage is another card that, like, it's kind of cool, and I like it in some decks, but not this one. It doesn't draw that many cards to always trigger its ability, and it is like nice generic draw, draw, but it does nothing to do with artifacts or energy, so we just don't need it here. And then if you go for further upgrades, these are just like random generic expensive cards. Urza I thought was more expensive, so I threw it here because I thought it was like a $30 card. Actually, it's like 10 bucks, so that's actually maybe should be in like the 10 quick upgrades section, but it's like the best mana generator in an artifact deck, plus it comes with a huge card instruct, that's great too. And then just generic upgrades too, like Mana Drain, Fierce Guardianship, Teferi's Protection. These are just good in any deck that can run them. All right, we move on to ranking the Precon. So I rank the Precon based on just two factors, the commander and the 99, and I just give it a point of between 1 to 3. An A is 3 points, a C is just 1 point. So overall, just out of 6 points, what it will be ranking as. So the commander for science is an easy A. Madison Lee does a great job tying both themes together, the energy theme and the artifact theme. And she comes down early, and her abilities are always relevant and impactful. And the fact that she comes down on turn 3 is probably the biggest enticing thing about the entire deck that makes it work, because you want to play Madison Lee, and then you want to start dumping your hand of artifacts. Honestly, without her in the command zone, this deck would feel a lot less like an energy deck. Now, the 99 is a bit disappointing if you were expecting a fully committed energy deck. There's certainly a strong energy theme here, and our commander emphasizes energy, but if you want a deck loaded with energy cards, you're gonna have to wait until Modern Horizons 3, where we get another energy deck. However, this deck doesn't lose points for that, because I'm just ranking how powerful the deck is, not if it probably had some maybe false advertising, let's say. And the 99 itself is overall very strong, with the highlight being its powerful finishers. There's some very weak and non-thematic cards in here, like any Precon really, but that's not enough for me to drop this to a B, so I'm gonna give this one an A. So overall, 6 out of 6, A ranking. Next, we've got Mutant Menace. This is a Sultai deck that is focused on counters. Radiation counters for milling, and +1/+1 counters to grow your team. And those two counter themes overlap in cute ways, the most straightforward way being Proliferate, which adds more counters to everything. The deck also has a Mutant sub-theme, which is a new creature type that basically its main shtick is +1/+1 counters and milling, so it's just kind of designed to work with the two other main archetypes of the deck. So the goal is to play mutants, mill everyone, grow your team with +1/+1 counters, and then smash face. To support these themes, I counted 19 cards that add radiation counters or rad counters, 22 cards that put +1/+1 counters on stuff, and then 16 cards that care about counters. Mostly +1/+1 counters like hardened scales, but also generic proliferate cards like Radstorm. And then there's also 10 cards that care specifically about milling, like Screeching Scorch Beast, which makes a lot of sense because radiation counters, rad counters, are just milling the entire table, so you might as well get some value out of that. And our commander, the Wise Mothman, ties all these themes together. It's a mutant that cares about rad counters, milling, and +1/+1 counter. It's one of the best sources of rad counters and +1/+1 counters in the deck, making it a slam dunk for the command zone. Now, in terms of deck ratios, I count 50 mana, 39 lands, and 11 ramp. Some land ramp, but weirdly lots of mana rocks, like Talisman of Resilience. There's 10 card draw, some of it is from clues, some of it is from +1/+1 counters, and some more are generic, like Guardian Project. There's 6 targeted removal, some really good artifact token hate, like Rampaging Yao, and some cool synergy cards like Atomize, which remove something but also proliferates. There are 2 board wipes, a smaller wipe, Find and Finality, and a bigger one, Nuclear Fallout. There's 4 graveyard recursion cards, 3 of which only get something back as they are milled, like the Master, and surprisingly not a lot of like generic recursion cards for a mill deck. There's 0 tutors, 0 graveyard hate, also kind of surprising, and at least 1 finisher that meets my criteria, which is Biomass Mutation, though not giving evasion kind of sucks. So overall, the deck has good ratios and lots of powerful synergy pieces, but it's surprising how few graveyard recursion options it has, and there's no graveyard hate, and the finishers are kind of weak. So for 10 quick upgrades, the number 1 card I would throw into this deck is Mesmeric Orb. This is like the ultimate card for any sort of mill deck. It's just going to trigger our commander like crazy, and we're going to get billions of +1/+1 counters, and a lot of other cards that care about self-mill, care about one or more cards, and Mesmeric Orb, you know, deals in one instance at a time, which is fantastic. Also, I mentioned how our commander is so freaking powerful in the deck. Copying it with a Spark Double is actually kind of awesome, and it even comes with a +1/+1 counter, so it's already ready to be proliferated on that stuff. Then I added some +1/+1 counter payoffs. Kami of Whispered Hopes doubles basically the +1/+1 counters we're getting, because they're all just like increments of 1 usually, and it taps to generate a ton of mana. Kodama of the West Tree, since we have a bunch of creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, is going to turn into Insane Ramp, and I didn't realize it was nearly $15. That's kind of wild. Then I added Forgotten Ancient, one of the best +1/+1 counter generators in the entire format. It grows super fast. Then I'm running Lightning Greaves, which is low-key probably the best card to be adding to the deck. There's a lot of cards that have tap abilities or attack triggers, so casting them and then immediately giving the haste is like super good. The Shroud can actually be a little bit annoying since a lot of our cards like target, like the Mothman and stuff, but it shouldn't be that big of a deal, and just like that 0 mana equip cost is more than enough to pay off any of the clunkiness. And then I mentioned there's like no graveyard recursion outside of like immediate ones on the same turn. Muldrotha is great because we do have a decent variety of permanent types, and Muldrotha you could play it and then immediately play a land from the graveyard and then start casting spells out of them, and it's just really good. One of the best proliferate cards that's not in the deck is Ripples of Potential. It not only gives a bunch of counters on all our stuff, but then also phases them out, so protects them at instant speed. That's great. The final 2 cards, Sir Conrad the Grim is another finisher for the deck that doesn't require us to actually be attacking. We're going to put a lot of rad counters on everybody, so just if we land a Sir Conrad and he's not immediately dealt with, we're just going to basically make all our opponents lose life very, very quickly until they die. And then I added one more asymmetrical board wipe, Wave Goodbye. It's a bounce spell, but it doesn't really bounce any of our creatures because we have so many ways of putting +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. So as long as all of our creatures have at least 1 counter on it, Wave Goodbye is just a one-sided mass bounce spell, which is really good for 4 mana. For cuts, I'm taking out Lily Bowen. It's just very slow. Night King Ambusher is a fine finisher / clock in the deck, but we just have better options now. Young Deathclaws works really well with what the deck is trying to be doing, and it's another way of utilizing our graveyard. It's just kind of slow and mana inefficient. Biomass Mutation, I mentioned it is a finisher, but we just added better ways of closing out the game, and this doesn't provide any sort of evasion, so it's on the weaker end in my opinion. Then we're cutting Nuke Launcher. I think this card is just kind of bad. The Bobblehead, just not really good as a one-off. Frank Sanity, this is not like a real mill deck, honestly. Like, you're not trying to mill your opponents out, so this card is kind of lame, and it only targets one person. Struggle for Project Purity, I just don't think either mode is that interesting, and just having the option of both is just not good enough in my opinion for 4 mana. And then finally, we're taking out Bloatfly Swarm, which is fine in the deck, but just kind of meh at both things it's trying to do. And we have 39 lands, so I just take out the worst one, which is Terramorphic Expanse. For further upgrades, I would look to start adding more graveyard synergy. So Wonder is a great way to give mass evasion for a team. Filth is another way to give mass evasion, especially if we pair it with Urborg, which holy moly is it expensive these days. And then just add more stuff that cares about +1/+1 counters. Like Incubation Druid is essentially a 2-drop that taps for 3 mana in this deck, because we could so easily put a counter on it. We don't actually have to pay 5 to adapt it. So that's awesome too. So that's what I'd be looking at. Stuff that cares about counters, stuff that cares more about self-mill, and then yeah, that's basically it. And then upgrade the lands. All right, the ranking for Mutant Menace. So the commander is an A. The Wise Mothman really rocks. It puts a clock on your opponents. It has evasion. It gets rad counters going at a consistent pace, which is the deck is built around. It quickly grows your army with +1/+1 counters, which your deck is also built around. Speaking personally, it's my favorite face commander of the Precons, and I'm deathly afraid of moths. And the 99 is also very impressive. It's trying to juggle a bunch of themes, and it pulls it off very well. The ratios are good, and though not all the cards are super mana efficient or mind-boggling good or whatever, the entire thing comes together very, very well. So I'm going to give the 99 also an A, so 6 out of 6 rating. All right, we move on to Hail Caesar, which is a Mardu Go Wide Combat Aristocrats deck. The goal is to flood the board with creature tokens, pump them up and go attacking, occasionally sacrificing them as well for further value. To support these themes, the deck has 19 creature token makers, 17 cards that support combat, either growing your team like Overseer of Vault 76, or generating value from combat like Rose Cutthroat Raider. There are 13 cards that benefit from your creatures dying, like Pitiless Plunder, a great reprint by the way. And there's also a minor human and soldier sub-theme, since most creatures are of those types, but it's very, very minor, just like a couple cards for both. Caesar himself is a fantastic face commander that ties the themes together. He very efficiently offers token generation, card draw, and a finisher all rolled into one, making him always powerful as long as you have sack fodder on the battlefield, which the deck is all about. In terms of deck ratios, I count 47 mana, 36 lands, and 11 ramp, so kind of on the low side for the land count. 10 card draw, most based on creatures dying like Skull Clamp. 8 targeted removal, most of it is good, like Anguish Unmaking is a format staple. 5 board wipes, 3 being mostly one-sided, the best being Ruinous Ultimatum, so very impressive in terms of board wipes. 2 Graveyard Recursion, 0 Tutors, 1 Graveyard Hate, kind of bad Graveyard Hate too. It's General's Enforcer. It's not really meant to be Graveyard Hate, to be honest. And then 3 finishers, and our commander being great at it and just sitting in the command zone, which is awesome. So the ratios here look good. It could use more mana, I think, but that's basically my only quibble with it. All right, we're gonna go for 10 quick upgrades. First card I'm gonna be throwing into the deck is actually Ishin 2 Heavens as 1. This deck has a lot of attack triggers, our commander included. So I decided, you know what, why not double it up in one of the most efficient ways possible on a 3-drop. Speaking of attack triggers, another great way of doubling the value of all of our attack triggers is extra combats, which this deck really, really wants to have because it's really easy to turn the corner once we just throw down 1 extra combat. So Combat Celebrant is fantastic. You can like attack with it, exert it, and then just like sacrifice it to Caesar or whatever for maximum value. Response and Resurgence is, it can act as removal in a pinch. It's not very good at it, but it can work. But the Resurgence side is just very, very powerful. Honestly, for 5 mana, just as a standalone card, I would still run Resurgence, but I really like the flexibility of having removal side on it too. This is also like a go wide token deck that runs a lot of humans. Like nearly every single creature in the deck is human. Some of the tokens aren't humans, but regardless, we have a lot of humans. So Horn of Gondor is going to be fantastic. It's just one of the best token generators in a deck that is very human heavy. Then I'm adding Call the Copper Coats. I really love instant speed mass token generators like this one. It also makes humans, which is great too. And there are also soldiers, which has a little bit of extra synergy in the deck. Also, since this is a token deck, Nayali is a great way to both double the damage output of our attacking creatures, but also generate even more card advantage. And speaking of card advantage, Idol of Oblivion is just nice. It comes out early. It's just nice incremental draw for 2 mana. The mana base is a little bit, and it also requires, I think, a couple more lands. So I threw in an Exotic Orchard, which is a little staple that just works very well in any 3-color deck. And the final 2 cards, Knight of the White Orchid, another early ramp card. It's a human. Works really well with that too. And then you can just sacrifice it as fodder to get more value out of it later. And then Felwar Stone is another way to mana fix. It usually taps for at least 2 colors at a typical table and will help you cast, you know, your spells. So that's good. In terms of cuts, we're taking out Butch Deloria. Ton of Snakes do not rule. Eradish is just not very good in this deck. Mr. House could be good as a commander, but not here where there's like just him and like 1 bobblehead for dice rolling. Not good. Nipton Lottery is just like a bad board wipe. I don't like it at all. I do not think this card is good. Like, I like that it splits second and it can remove at least 1 creature very efficiently, but I don't know. I feel like this card has too much variance to it. Survivor's Medkit is a bad card. The 2 bobbleheads, not here, not good. And then finally, Assemble a Legion. It makes tokens, which is great, but it just does so incredibly slowly. It's way too slow. And then White Glove Gourmand. The payoff here is that you get to make food, but like the deck really doesn't care for food tokens. It's just kind of bad. And then for further upgrades, Grim Reaper Sprint. I'm actually shocked is not in this Precon. It's from Fallout, but it's in the Scrappy Survivors one and not here. Even though I think Grim Reaper Sprint would be 10 times better in this deck. It's good in the other one too, don't get me wrong, but it would have been fantastic here because this deck is all about sacrificing as well too. So yeah, definitely throw that in. And then obviously this is a go wide deck. It goes with tokens, so Cathar's Crusade is the best anthem for that sort of style deck. All right, overall rankings. The Commander is another easy A. Caesar is simply very good. I love value engines in the command zone, and this one is even a finisher later on, which, I mean, I cannot complain about. And it gives you access to 3 colors, so tons of options. And the 99 is also an A. It's just very, very good. The synergy and ratios are tight, with the removal suite, especially the board wipes, being a major highlight. There's plenty of underpowered cards here, but only a few that don't fit the deck's themes. So overall, I'm very, very impressed with it. All right, we move on to the final deck, Scrappy Survivors. This is a Naya deck focused on auras, equipment, and junk. The goal is to enhance your creatures with auras and equipment until they're big enough to smash opponents to death while creating junk for card advantage. To support these themes, I counted 13 equipment and 1 equipment generator, which is more of a brown. There are 15 auras, with the best one being Mantle of the Ancients. There are 2 cards that support only equipment and 2 cards that only support auras, but there are 15 cards to support both, like strong back. And then finally, there are 7 junk token generators. The Commander, Dogmeat, is a very good boy, acting as both Graveyard Recursion, but more importantly, an amazing junk generator for your team, rewarding you for attacking with multiple creatures instead of loading up on just one. The deck has very little synergy with junk tokens outside of them being incredible card advantage, which is a little bit disappointing, but honestly, they work just fine by themselves. Now, in terms of deck ratios, I count 53 mana sources, 38 lands, and 13 ramp. Some generic, but most are specific or require jumping through hoops like Sticky Fingers. 10 card draw, all of which are junk tokens, which is kind of impressive. 6 targeted removal, mostly generic, but some thematic. 3 board wipes. 4 graveyard recursion, including a staple, Mantle of the Ancients. 0 tutors, 1 graveyard hate, Scavenger Grounds, and then at least 2 finishers, the most exciting being Grim Reaper's Sprint. So overall, the deck has great ratios. Not all the cards are bangers, but most of them are, so overall, very impressive. Now for 10 quick upgrades. We start with the remaining good junk token generator to add to the deck. It's Rose Cutthroat Raider. This card is just fantastic and just better here than the Precon it was printed in, oddly enough. It generates up to 3 junk tokens if you have 3 opponents, but even more importantly, whenever you sacrifice a junk, you add 1 red mana, so it's like a mana discount for all the spells you're going to be casting as you're cracking your junk. So that's fantastic, and obviously the junk deck. Speaking of fantastic in the junk deck, Crime Novelist works much the same way. As you're sacrificing your junk, you get to add a red mana, but you're also growing Crime Novelist into actually a legitimate threat. Kodama of the West Tree also shows up here. All your creatures are going to be modified with equipment and auras, so you might as well ramp and insanely efficiently with the Kodama. And then, unsurprisingly, when you have a commander that's all about attacking and attack triggers, extra combats are going to be really good. Hexplate Wallbreaker, it's an equipment. It comes already pre-equipped, which is very nice. And it gives you an additional combat, which is incredible. Then we also have Aki Battle Squad. This deck is all about being modified, so your modified creatures just get an extra combat. Then I really wanted to take advantage of all the junk that we're generating. We're going to be casting a lot of spells from exile, so we might as well build around that a little bit, right? So Rocco Street Chef, it generates card advantage for everybody, but more importantly, you're going to be making a ton of food and also growing your creatures very, very big, very quickly. Commander Liar Portier not only generates a lot of card advantage, but also all the spells you're casting from exile, including your junk, are going to be getting a significant discount as long as you're attacking. Kamiya Celebration, also, you know, we're all about modification over here. It generates even more card advantage, but also as we're casting spells from our junk or whatever, we're also growing our team. Then the last two cards, Gilwain Casting Director. As we're casting our spells, they come pre-enchanted, so you're already generating junk off them as soon as you're attacking with Dogmeat. And then the final card I'm going to be adding is Delayed Blast Fireball, which is just a fantastic one-sided board wipe in a deck that casts from exile very efficiently. In terms of cuts, we're taking out Abundant Growth, which is kind of like mana fixing. It works well with like a single card in the deck, but it's not very good here. Squirrel Nest, also just not very good here. I don't really care to make 1/1s for a 3-drop. Acquired Mutation, it's fine, but still just not very good. The bobbleheads, I've already mentioned, are not very good by themselves. The agility bobblehead too. Big Hoarder Rancher is like fine in like a go tall deck, but this deck is all about enchanting and equipping our multiple creatures, so not trying to make them as big as possible. And it's also a 5-drop, so it's kind of awkward to cast off our junk. Duchess is just bad, Cast is just bad. And then the final two cards, 3-Dog I love as a commander, but you really want to have a deck like just built around him, essentially, going wide and then having a lot more auras than this deck actually runs. And then Single Combat is another weird one in this deck. We're trying to go wide with enchanted and equipped creatures. We're not really trying to go tall in this deck. That's not what Dogmeat wants to be doing. So going down to just one creature kind of sucks for us. So I don't really like it here. That's why I replace it with Delayed Blast Fireball. For further upgrades, there's a lot of cards you could still be adding to the deck, and not even like really expensive ones. So like Chushiro works really well with our modified theme, Faldorn works really well with our junk tokens, and then cards like Barbed Spike and Glimmer Lens, they're 2-drops. You can play them on turn 2, and they come pre-equipped onto a creature. So you can go like turn 2 Barbed Spike, turn 3 play Dogmeat, swing with the Spike, and you're already generating junk on turn 3 the moment you play Dogmeat. So that's like the idea behind them. And then also, you know, they have other, they're already pre-modified and all that stuff too. So that works really nicely multiple ways. All right, overall rankings. Dogmeat, another easy A commander. All of these were bangers, honestly. So Dogmeat, fantastic commander. It's a 3-drop that has access to 3 colors of mana, so you cannot complain about that. It has recursion on ETB, and then it's an amazing junk generator that baseline acts as great card advantage, but can do so much more once you actually start upgrading the deck. You need to work for that value. You have to go wide and also suit up your creatures, but the payoff is definitely worth it. And you know what? The 99 is another easy A. The 99 is just very impressive. It's probably the most impressive out of all the precons. The deck is trying to juggle both auras and equipment, which is never an optimized path, honestly, but the deck pulls it off very well. There's a little bit of awkwardness with some cards only caring for auras and some only caring for equipment, like Pure Steel Paladin, but there's only 4 total of those, and it has plenty of stuff that cares about both, which is the most important thing. The junk theme has basically no support, which is kind of lame, but it's good all by itself and allows for interesting upgrades. So yeah, I don't actually care for Fallout. I've never played any of the Fallout video games, and yet here I am giving every single precon A's across the board. So yeah, I think these precons are super sweet. If you're a Fallout fan, definitely pick them up. They're just going to be really well balanced. I'm not going to say that they're like super overpowered or like the strongest precons ever printed, but they definitely fit the themes that they're going for. They definitely achieve the goals that they're going for, and it's a very impressive product overall. And while I don't really care for all the Fallout cards in terms of Fallout universe, there's a lot of really cool cards that I'm really excited to get my hands on and add to other decks, and all the face commanders are very impressive and cool build arounds if you just want to start building from scratch. So yeah, I hope you liked this breakdown and analysis and upgrade guide of all the Fallout precons. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If there's anything you would like to see done differently, maybe the ranking criteria could be changed. I don't know. Let me know in the comments section if there's anything you want to see differently in the future. Like and subscribe if you like that sort of stuff. And until next time, friends, see ya!